Are kittens here to rescue our space game hopes and dreams from the smoldering wreckage that is Kerbal Space Program 2? Or should we wait before we dare to fire up the hype train for a spiritual successor to KSP again? Let's look at what we know so far. Hello everybody and welcome! On October 31st, a surprise announcement rocked the Kerbal Space Program subreddit when Dean Hall, CEO of RocketwerkZ, showed a glimpse of a new space game his team has been working on. Current codename: Kitten Space Agency, or KSA for short. The clip shows game footage with seamless movement from a point high above the moon, closing in and flying across its craters and then back out into space. Dean also put more info in that post, which we will go over, and there was a lot of information that was shared on the KSA Discord. I also had the chance to talk directly to the developers, and I was able to piece a couple of things together. And since cats have 9 lives, in this video we're going to talk about 9 things we know about Kitten Space Agency. And I will surely keep tabs on what is going on with that game, so make sure you are subscribed if you want to learn more over the coming weeks and months. With that out of the way, let's do it like the team at RocketwerkZ and start from scratch. Yes, there are going to be cat puns, I'm sorry. Both KSP and KSP2 were developed on top of the Unity engine. It and others like Unreal Engine provide a great basis to build upon when doing run-of-the-mill game development. But as I learned during my research for the KSP2 development history video, link is in the description, these engines reach their limits when your game world is not just a flat Earth with infinite sky, but a physically correct simulation of celestial bodies. How do you tell an engine where up is when you are floating in space? That's just one aspect. There are a lot of other shortcomings when you want to build a space sim with Unity or Unreal. So RocketwerkZ said, screw it, and built their own framework called Brutal, written in C++ but with a C# wrapper. It is being maintained by a dedicated enterprise team and offers the Kitten Space Agency developers a lot more freedom than normal game engines. Dean Hall and Jamie Layton, also known as JPL Repo, gave some examples why this makes things a lot easier than working on other space games, with Dean saying their approach will enable their graphics specialist BlackRack to have almost direct access to the Vulkan API. And yes, the same JPL Repo and BlackRack from KSP fame. More on that later. First, let's talk about some of the claims the developers made during a Discord stream. And this leads us to performance. Tens of thousands of parts per vessel. Terrain generation with hundreds of frames per second. No lag when jumping between vehicles. No Kraken.
I don't expect we're going to have Kraken issues, because we are not going to have floating point issues.
Big claims both Dean Hall and Jamie Layton made during their stream, and I'm sure some of you with KSP2 PTSD will remember this.
We're killing the Kraken. That is a hell of a claim to make.
But don't freak out yet. There's a very good reason why Jamie is so confident that KSA will do a lot better. He has worked on both KSP and KSP2, and knows firsthand why there are so many issues with these games.
Why do Krakens exist in other space games? Because they had problems they were never able to solve due to the architecture. Those games that were written in Unity, they all used floats, single precision, everything was a long way from the camera, whereas here, everything is not as it seems. And we'll be able to run different physics scenes and that are local to whatever is going on, even though they may be 1,000,000 miles away from the camera, which means no floating point issues. So therefore, hopefully, no Krakens.
Using a bespoke architecture to simulate the game world will avoid these issues. During the stream, Dean Hall spoke a lot about how he hated lag, especially when switching between vessels in Kerbal Space Program. He really wants KSA to be seamless and demonstrated flying across the surface of the moon with more than 1,000 frames per second. Granted, we don't know what type of machine this was run on, but it all appears to be really smooth. One thing the team has a lot of experience with already is multithreading. It is done heavily in Stationeers and also in the upcoming Art of the Rail, both games that RocketwerkZ has developed. For KSA, they assign stuff that needs to be done for a frame of gameplay to be generated on your screen to a series of so-called workers. If you want to have 60 frames per second, each of these workers has roughly 16 milliseconds to finish their task per frame before the next frame can be rendered. According to rocketwerkz, the workers currently only need 0.1 millisecond on average for this. So lots of headroom. As for part count, if you know my channel and my KSP shenanigans, you know that I tend to build rather gigantic vessels, sometimes with thousands of parts, and then suffer through more like seconds per frame than frames per second. In the KSA Discord's FAQ section, Dean Hall goes into a bit more detail why they will limit the part count to 65,000 per vehicle. Apparently the game would be capable of rendering much more, but in regards to multiplayer and memory usage, they want to limit the value. So why 65,000? Well, it's FFFF in hexadecimal, which is 16 bits or 2 bytes. I don't know about your biggest builds in KSP, but I think mine maxed out at 3000 parts or something, apart from that 9000 part monstrosity I unleashed in KSP2 just for fun a while back. For KSA, it of course depends on what these parts are going to be. I mean, if we have to do each rivet manually, then we're going to hit that limit pretty quickly, but I doubt that this will be the case here. What I don't doubt is that this project is being handled with a lot of respect for the community. One of the most disturbing facts about how KSP2 was developed was that in the beginning the new team was not allowed to contact the then still active Kerbal Space Program development team to figure out how the game's code worked. And the game's creator, Philippe Falang, also known as Harvester, was not tapped for his knowledge, not even in a consulting role. Neither were other people that had worked on KSP in the past. Kitten Space Agency is the complete opposite. One of its main developers is Jamie Layton, known by his nickname JPL Repo, who has worked on both KSP and KSP2. They also hired Ghassan Lamar, better known as BlackRack in the KSP community. He is the brain behind the wonderful Scatterer mod for KSP as well as volumetric clouds, and he was also part of the KSP2 team where he improved the game's atmospheric graphics considerably. If you look at the people in the KSA Discord, you will also find other notable names in the Community Veterans section. Former KSP lead game designer Maximal, modder and former KSP2 developer Nertea, modding legend Nathan Kell, just to name a few. And one name in particular is also present with a developer role: Harvester. While it is not yet clear in which capacity he is going to contribute to the project, the fact alone that rocketwerkz is in active contact with him clearly shows that they have a lot of respect for the original space game we all fell in love with. And when I say we all, that includes rocketwerkz CEO Dean Hall. He is also a fan of Kerbal Space Program, and a long time ago he even wrote mods for it under his nickname Rocket2Guns. And because of this, rocketwerkz applied for becoming the studio to develop KSP2 back in 2017. Their proposal for a KSP successor even made it to the final 3. But they made the mistake of focusing more on design documents and how they would solve the technical problems, and had no shiny artwork. Actually, they still don't have anything in that regard. More on that later. First, I want to talk about something else that was a big reason why the original KSP became such a success. Lots and lots of mods. And this is why KSA promised to deliver easy modding. rocketwerkz say that everything they can do with the game can also be done by modders. They will be able to change data, thus modifying planets, moons and entire solar systems. They will also be able to write their own C# code and inject it into the game. Nobody at the moment, of course, can verify this, but during the aforementioned stream they demonstrated how they could change the size of the moon to 1/10 of what it is, and they added a new asteroid to the solar system basically on the fly. Dean Hall also showed off on the KSA Discord how he implemented the stars in the background of the simulation. That's not a simple painted skybox image, that's real-world data simulated within the game. When being stationary, like not leaving your current solar system, the star field will remain the same. But when you, for instance, move to another star system, The positions of the stars can change while you move across the galaxy. And yes, modders can use this to create their own star fields for custom solar systems. It's still too early to verify all of the developers' claims, but at least they have presented early examples of how modding can work, and not just claims of how it might work in the future. In general, all the available info on Kitten Space Agency is very much no nonsense. Actually, right now there is no shiny stuff. I mentioned earlier that there was no artwork for the proposal rocketwerkz pitched to Take-Two for how they would do a KSP sequel. Even now there isn't anything available. When asked about when there is going to be artwork, Dean Hall replied with, "Honestly, I don't know." It's really early stuff right now, because the main focus for the team is the technical foundation. They really want to get the orbit and terrain simulation correct so that the rest of the game can land on all fours without everything breaking apart. But do we have any idea what the rest of the game is going to be? Well, we already know that there is going to be parts-based construction of vehicles. There was mention of propellers in the stream. They also want to do robotics. And while explaining the different layers of physics from orbital movements down to single vessels, Dean Hall explained their architecture can also be expanded in the other direction, meaning it will be possible to add multiple solar systems, either via mods or by the team themselves. But I do wonder in what direction the game is going to go visually. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the art style they chose for Stationeers, but then again, that was a different game done many years ago. There was a single picture posted on Reddit of a very rough concept for the Kitten Space Agency Catstronauts, or Kittenauts? Purballs? Whatever they're going to be called, I wouldn't take that image too serious at this very early stage. What I do take seriously, or rather what rocketwerkz takes seriously, is transparency. Remember when we tried to prod and pry the KSP2 team for any morsel of information? Everything was kept under wraps like they're protecting nuclear launch codes. And often us content creators had to go through middlemen to even get in touch with the developers. Well, Kitten Space Agency is the complete opposite. The team is super open and are answering questions in great detail, even though everything is still at a very early stage. On their Discord there is a dev updates channel with already a lot of details. There is even a channel automatically showing commit messages when developers push new updates. And there is an FAQ section where Dean Hall goes into detail about a couple of aspects of the game. This all ties back into the respect for the community section I mentioned above. It seems that rocketwerkz very much acknowledges that they can only deliver a good game when they listen to the people who will actually play it. Radical idea, I know. This would have never happened under the auspices of Take-Two. And in order to get feedback soon, there's going to be some form of early access. I know that term has some negative connotation nowadays, but instead of selling an unfinished game for full price and calling it early access, rocketwerkz has a different plan. They want to get early builds out to people for free. Yes, you heard that right. Don't believe me? Take it from the team themselves.
There will be builds that will be available to the public that you'll get for free initially, because we want feedback from all of the community and modders particularly. So yes, initially it'll be free.
It's not going to be a free-to-play game. We just want to get something out to show that we have a thing.
Yeah. It won't be free to play, eventually it'll be pay to play, but yeah.
Be aware, this is probably going to be really early access, like not even close to a finished game, just the foundations to see if their assumptions are correct and to stress test the architecture, then build upon it once the feedback has come in. When is this going to happen? Well, probably sometime in 2025. The real work on KSA didn't really start until after we found out that KSP2 development is going to be halted half a year ago. Since then, rocketwerkz have been hard at work creating the foundation for their own spiritual successor to KSP. But even though there are basic things in place, there is not really gameplay available yet. At least nothing we have seen so far. Most of the things we have seen were from Jupiter and its moons, as well as our own moon. which led a lot of people to ask if KSA is going to be set in the real solar system. The answer to this is at the moment. Basically, the team took real-world data to see if their simulation would handle the movements of celestial objects correctly. That includes comets on hyperbolic orbits. Jamie said during their stream that real hyperbolic and parabolic orbits are now possible in KSA, something they weren't able to really do in KSP, instead they had to fake it. Dean mentioned that one of the next steps they are going to do is going to be a custom solar system, not the real one. Everything in regards to content, and that includes the current planets and moons, is subject to change. My personal assumption is that the game is going to be shipped with the custom solar system and people will be able to add the real solar system later on as a mod much more easily than it was possible for KSP. I mean, it totally made sense to have a fictional solar system for Kerbals, since they themselves are fictional beings. But right now we're not talking about Kerbal Space Program, we're talking about Kitten Space Agency, so the main characters will be Kittens. Really? Well, maybe. I would treat Kitten Space Agency as a working title for now. Like a lot of things with this game, this is probably subject to change. The developers also said so during their stream, but for now it's Kittens. So of course this opens the floodgates for cat puns. For instance, instead of litho braking, we could be doing litter braking. Or the first interstellar engine could be called the Nyan Drive and has a rainbow plume. Or catstronauts have 9 lives before they are permanently lost. Whether they stick with Kittens or Flurkin, or whether it will become Kerbal Space Program, it shows that there is at least some humor present within the team, and I do hope it translates to the finished product. A big reason why KSP worked was because Kerbals are funny. But will KSA work? Before you buy a ticket for the hype train, it's time for a conclusion. I have to admit, assessing KSA is not easy for me. Back in February 2023, when KSP2 came out and was objectively not as good as everyone had hoped, I called it a diamond in the rough, because I believed the developers would be able to make it work given some time. Now, after the entire studio was shut down, KSP is just a sad, smoldering piece of crumpled carbon that is likely never going to be finished. I want to believe that rocketwerkz know what they are doing. From the things we know so far, they are attacking the problem from the right angle. Build a stable foundation first, then do all the fancy bits. In many ways, KSP2 was handled the other way around. The big question is if KSA will be more than just a great technology demonstrator on how to do orbital simulation and spacecraft physics. And don't get me wrong, it's totally correct for rocketwerkz to focus on that first. There is no game engine out there right now that would enable them to do what KSP attempted, but without all of its technological shortfalls. So they have to solve that technology problem first, before they can make a fun game out of it. But will it be the real successor to Kerbal Space Program? That is way too early to tell. And there are others out there. Juno New Origins comes to mind, which is already available and offers a couple of big improvements over KSP, for instance making everything procedural, but it lacks a bit in the charm department. Those druids are a bit bland compared to Kerbals. And there's also rocket science, which I highlighted in a previous video as a KSP alternative. Aside from rocketwerkz is doing, there are also other smaller ventures trying to make a spiritual successor to KSP, and we cannot rule out the possibility that somebody is going to grab the intellectual property rights to Kerbals from Take-Two and goes on to continue KSP2. A couple of companies have tried, but it seems that Take-Two's asking price for it is way too high right now. Anyways, I'm being carefully optimistic about KSA. If the underlying technology holds up, the game could end up being what we all had hoped KSP2 would be.
My main gripe about KSP1, which is performance.
Either way, as promised in the beginning, I'm going to keep my eyes and ears open for more info on this and will pounce as soon as I find out more. And you can support me in doing so by becoming a YouTube member or patron. There is bonus content for people who sign up, and if you choose one of the higher tiers, your name will show up here, just like all of these wonderful people. Thank you so much for your support. KSP2 is dead. Long live the space simulation game genre, be it KSA or something else.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.